Welcome to Emergency Procedures Training for Cirque Lodge. In the absence of an administrator on call or executive committee member, the shift lead at each facility will be designated as the person in charge of carrying out the appropriate emergency procedure. Emergency contacts are listed here that include administrators, providers, facilities, and admissions on call, police non-emergency, police emergency, and poison control. Please refer to shift report to determine who is on call for the day. There are first aid kits located at the front desk, at the studio in the East Lobby, the studio art room, studio ropes course, the studio communications office, the studio housekeeping closet, all Cirque Lodge vehicles, the lodge group room, the lodge closet, as well as the lodge circ room. First aid and biohazard kits can be found in the studio detox and the med rooms of each location at the studio, the lodge, and the lookout. Emergency water is located in the studio basement and the med room on the second floor. The lodge shed and the med room on the main floor at the lodge. Emergency lanterns are located in the studio closet on the second floor and the lodge closet across from the med room and in the lookout staff office. The studio's fire and burglar alarms are located in the East Lobby near the reception desk. At the lodge, they're located next to the front door and on the second floor. And the lookout fire alarm is above the washer and dryer in the staff office. There will be a video at the end of this presentation showing the locations of the utilities and how to shut them off at each facility. A fire extinguisher at the lodge can be found on the main floor next to the front door. A fire extinguisher at the lookout can be found on the main floor by the front door. And at the studio, there are fire extinguishers in each stairwell. Please refer to the Emergency Procedures Handbook for a detailed list of other locations fire extinguishers are held. In the event of a power failure at the studio, staff will retrieve the emergency lanterns from the second floor closet and disperse them to their identified locations. The list of identified locations is located in the Emergency Procedures Handbook. The lodge has a backup generator that will engage in the event of power failure there. In the event of an emergency, we adhere to procedures for the following. In the event of a medical emergency, we assess the situation and make sure the immediate area is safe and determine what the emergency is. We alert the shift lead and the nurse by calling them or sending a resident to notify these staff and alert emergency personnel by calling 911. Note, the shift lead will notify the provider on call and administrator on call for further directions and the counselor on call so that they may call the emergency contact if necessary. We assist the person experiencing the medical emergency following appropriate first responder, first aid, CPR procedures. Upon detection of smoke and/or fire, follow the RACE plan, which stands for Rescue, Remove Person or Persons from the Immediate Fire Scene or Room. Alert personnel by activating the nearest fire alarm pulse station and then call 911 to report the exact location of the fire. Please note the shift lead will notify the administrator on call and the counselor on call. Confine large fires and smoke by closing all doors in the area. Extinguish small fires by using a portable fire extinguisher or use it to escape from a large fire. Remember the PASS procedures when using the extinguisher. PASS stands for pull the pin, aim low at the base of the fire, squeeze the lever above the handle, and sweep from side to side, moving toward the fire until it is out. Evacuate the building of all residents and personnel in case of a large fire that cannot be extinguished by hand, and once outside, report to the shift lead. In the event of a vehicle emergency, we assess the situation and make sure everyone with the vehicle is safe, and before exiting the vehicle that the immediate area outside the vehicle is safe. Alert the shift lead by calling them and alert emergency personnel by calling 911 if necessary. Please note the shift lead will notify the administrator on call for further direction and the provider on call and the counselor on call if appropriate. Assist any residents if they are injured following appropriate first responder and first aid procedures. In the event of an earthquake, please remain calm. Duck or drop down to the floor. Take cover under a sturdy desk, table, or other furniture. Hold on to the furniture and be prepared to move and sway with it if necessary. If you are indoors, stay inside, crouch under a desk or table and hold on. Stay away from windows or glass dividers. Avoid brick walls and chimneys. You may also take cover against interior walls, protecting your head with your neck and arms. If you are outdoors, stay away from buildings, trees, telephone and electric lines. If you are driving, drive away from underpasses and overpasses, stop in a safe area, and stay inside your vehicle. After the earthquake has stopped, check yourself first for injuries. Ask or call out for help if needed. Check others around you for injuries and provide first aid if necessary. Check for fires, gas, water, or sewage breaks, downed electrical lines, building damage and potential problems during aftershocks such as cracks in the walls or foundation. Turn off interrupted utilities as necessary. Know how and where the electrical, gas, and water shutoffs are located. Follow evacuation procedures immediately and return only after the building has been declared safe by the appropriate authorities. As soon as you can, call the administrator on call with an assessment and for further direction. The administrator on call will determine if additional support is needed on site and will direct staff as necessary to come in. The administrator on call will assist the counselor on call in notifying emergency contacts and referral sources of the event. Clean up any dangerous spills. Tune radio to an emergency station and listen for instructions from public safety agencies. Do not use matches or open flames until you are sure there are no gas leaks. Do not turn light switches off and on. Sparks created by the switch contacts can ignite gas fumes. In the event of a flood, please stay calm. We are not likely to experience a flood given our locations, but if we were to have one, it would likely be after an earthquake and a severe failing of one of the canyon dams. In this event, we will likely receive advanced warning and be told to evacuate. If the lodge needs to be evacuated, the studio is the default rendezvous point unless directed otherwise by the administrator on call. If the studio needs to be evacuated, the administrator on call will determine the rendezvous point. Staff will move all the residents and medications to company vehicles using staff vehicles if necessary. Staff will proceed to the predetermined evacuation location, keeping the lead vehicle in sight at all times. Drivers should watch for damaged roads, slides, fallen wires, and avoid flooded or washed out roads, driving slowly and cautiously. You should abandon your vehicle immediately if it is caught in debris or water or stalls and cannot be restarted, and then proceed on foot. Do not attempt to cross water on foot. In the event of a power outage, please stay calm. A power outage independent of another situation, while still an emergent situation, is not typically one wherein imminent harm is possible. Power outages are typically short in duration. Reassure the residents that everything can and will be facilitated normally. At the lodge, there is a backup generator that will automatically engage to power the building. Lookout residents will be served their meals at the lodge if necessary during the power outage. The lookout and the studio do not have backup generators, but they both have emergency lanterns that can be used to light the building. We should assess the building and neighborhood and determine if the outage is limited to the facility or is an area outage. Call Rocky Mountain Power if it is an area outage and determine the expected length of the power outage. Call maintenance for direction if the outage is limited to the building. Alert the administrator on call of the situation. Assist the rest of the staff in doing the following. Retrieve the lanterns from their locations and disperse them to their identified locations in order to light the building. Determine the impact to meal prep and service and get approval to order out for meals if necessary. Determine the impact to the building temperature based on the time of year and discuss plans for heating and cooling with the administrator on call if necessary. A major winter storm can last for several days and be accompanied by high winds, freezing rain or sleet, heavy snowfall, and cold temperatures. People can become trapped without utilities or other services. Heavy snowfall and blizzards can trap people in cars. Attempting to walk for help in a blizzard can be a deadly decision. Winter storms can make driving and walking extremely hazardous. In the event of a winter storm, know in advance. It is very important to know ahead of time if we are expecting a storm when you are scheduled to work. Check the weather reports during the winter and know and understand the difference between the winter words of warning. It is also important to come to work prepared for the storm and the possibility that you may be trapped at work. Dress warm, wearing multiple layers and boots that you can stand and shovel in for several hours at a time, and possibly even an overnight bag. If the lodge needs to be evacuated, the studio is the default rendezvous point unless directed otherwise by the administrator on call. If the studio needs to be evacuated, the administrator on call will determine the rendezvous point. The shift lead will shut off the main power, gas, and water. Staff will move all the residents and medications to company vehicles using staff vehicles if necessary. Staff will then proceed to the predetermined evacuation location, keeping the lead vehicle in sight at all times. Given the location of the lodge, it is possible that we will experience the threat of forest fires. The North Fork Fire Department maintains evacuation protocols for the residential areas of the canyon. North Fork Fire Department and other safety officials will determine the areas to be evacuated and the routes to use depending upon a forest fire's behavior, location, the wind direction, and the terrain. Note that the most immediate route of evacuation may not be down North Fork Road past Sundance, but may instead be up through the Alpine Loop. It is also possible that we are directed to a shelter-in-place location. In the event of a forest fire, please stay calm. We are not unaccustomed to fires and know that while they can move swiftly, we will typically receive advance warning to evacuate without concern. If evacuation is necessary, we will be notified by a phone call from North Fork Fire Department, AM radio, home to home, or a siren. If there's time, Utah County Sheriff's deputies and Utah County Search and Rescue personnel will go house to house notifying occupants. If you do hear a prolonged siren, it means to leave immediately and without delay. If the lodge needs to be evacuated, the studio is the default rendezvous point unless directed otherwise by the administrator on call. If, in the rare event that the studio needs to be evacuated, the administrator on call will determine the rendezvous point. The shift lead will shut off the main power, gas, and water. Staff will move all residents and medications to company vehicles using staff vehicles if necessary. Staff will proceed to the predetermined evacuation location, keeping the lead vehicle in sight at all times. Drivers should watch for downed trees, slides, fallen wires, driving slowly and cautiously. If we become trapped in a vehicle, park the vehicle in an area clear of vegetation. Close all windows and vents. Turn the air conditioning to max mode or recirculate. Cover yourself with a wool or 100% cotton blanket or jacket. Lie on the floor of the vehicle if possible. Keep the vehicle running with the headlights on. Use your cell phone to call 911 and notify officials of your situation and exact location. If you can abandon the vehicle and continue on foot safely, then do that. If we are forced to travel on foot and become trapped, go to an area clear of vegetation, a ditch or a depression if possible. Lie face down. Cover your mouth and nose and cover your body with cotton clothing or a large cotton coat or blanket. Use your cell phone to call 911 and notify officials of your situation and exact location. If we are unable to evacuate the lodge, shut all windows and doors, leaving them unlocked. Remove flammable window shades and close the shutters if there are any. Remove lightweight curtains if there are any. Move flammable furniture to the center of the room or away from exterior walls, windows, or doors. Shut off the gas, propane, and turn off the pilot lights. Leave your inside and outside lights on so that firefighters can see the lodge under smoky conditions. Place ladders against the outside of the lodge to aid in firefighting efforts. Turn off the air conditioning. Move outside flammable items away from the lodge or bring them inside. Shelter away from the outside walls. Have residents put on long sleeves and long pants made of natural fibers such as cotton. Stay hydrated. Fill the sinks and bathtubs for an emergency water supply. Place wet towels under the doors to keep smoke and embers out. Ensure that you can exit the lodge if it catches fire. Remember that if it is hot inside the lodge, it is 4 to 5 times hotter outside. If we are forced to leave, move to an area that it has blackened or has already been burned. In the event of a resident or staff presenting with an infectious disease, the following protocols should be taken. If a resident presents with symptoms of an infectious disease, meaning cough, sneezing, a temperature, or bowel distress, they will be asked to wear a mask, increase hand washing, and be evaluated by one of the medical staff. The provider on call will determine the need to excuse and/or confine the resident to their room or isolate them in a detox room to prevent spread. If the infection is determined to be nosocomial, an incident report will be documented and appropriate medications, if any, prescribed. If a staff presents with symptoms of an infectious disease while at work, meaning cough, sneezing, temperature, or bowel distress, they should wear a mask, increase hand washing, and speak to their supervisor and one of the medical staff. The provider on call will determine the need to call the staff off shift pending resolution of symptoms. If the infection is determined to be nosocomial, it will be documented appropriately and staff will be directed to remain out of work in accordance with their own primary care physician's directions or until their symptoms resolve. In the event of a pandemic situation, the Executive Committee will initiate the following steps. A Level 1 response will include a simple and direct memo will go out to the staff outlining basic steps of the following protocol. Staff will be informed of additional steps being taken as necessary through shift report. Only administrative and outreach staff will communicate with our referral sources and/or other outside entities regarding the steps we are taking to insulate the facility. Only administrative, outreach, and clinical staff will communicate with family members or current residents regarding the steps we are taking to insulate the facility. Medical questions from current residents about the pandemic will be directed to the medical staff. Questions from current residents about hearsay and rumors will be directed to the clinical staff and shift leads. These staff will do their best to limit panic and dispel information without perpetuating any further hearsay or rumors. All other staff will direct questions to the appropriate source. Admissions will send an information letter to all potential admits outlining the in-house steps being taken regarding the pandemic and the potential impacts to an ordinary stay they may experience while with us. Admissions will begin pre-screening all potential admits via phone 24 to 48 hours prior to admission. This pre-screen information will be provided to the medical team prior to admission for follow-up. A decision to deny admission may be made at this time. All incoming admits will immediately go to detox and be screened in person by nursing for signs and symptoms as well as travel or contact risk. This screening information will be passed to the provider on call, and a decision to deny admission may be made at this time. Staff and residents will be instructed regularly on proper hand hygiene as well as cough and sneeze etiquette. Staff and residents will be expected to wash hands frequently throughout the day and use hand sanitizer that is available throughout all facilities. Staff and residents will be instructed to avoid touching their face. All staff will be expected to use disinfectant wipes and/or spray on their phones, computers, and community computers prior to use. Housekeeping will disinfect handrails, doorknobs, light switches, and any other high-touch surfaces daily, including the resident phones, computers, and gym equipment. Staff and residents will be instructed to practice social distancing. This includes no more hugging during steps or groups. When circling up, we will no longer touch. We will no longer shake hands when saying hello, but may instead wave or bow. Medical staff will continue to screen residents who present with signs and symptoms of any infectious disease, including the pandemic illness. If a reasonable doubt about infection exists, quarantine will be initiated and appropriate steps will be taken for testing. Staff will be encouraged to assess their personal health and inform their supervisor if they are sick and need to stay home. If a staff has a temperature above 100.4, they will not be allowed on shift. If a staff must call off shift, they may be given the option to use personal paid days to cover the time if necessary. VIP retreats will be suspended and outreach travel will be restricted. On-site VIP retreats, workshops, or community events will be suspended and/or restricted. Outreach staff will continue to work with our referral sources from their ordinary bases of operation, but will stop unnecessary business-related travel. Out-of-state visitors will be restricted from all facilities without prior permission from the provider on call. Screening of all visitors, including residents, family and friends, sponsors, contractors, delivery service staff, and ancillary service staff by the receptionist at the studio or the shift lead at the lodge will commence. These individuals will be restricted from the facility if determined necessary. Outside 12-step meetings at the studio will be allowed only in the north lobby. Guests are required to enter and exit through the north lobby entrance. The Friday night AA dinner at the studio will be suspended until further notice. The meeting will continue, but must follow the guideline above. The north lobby will no longer be used for ordinary programming events as it will be considered a public space. The north lobby high-touch surface areas will be sanitized following an outside 12-step meeting. Sponsor meetings at the lodge will continue, but guests will be asked to remain in the great room. The great room's high-touch surface areas will be sanitized following this meeting. Suspension of out-of-state travel will be in place for current residents. Family Week will shift to a virtual program. Resident family members will be informed by counselors via email and follow-up calls after the residents have been told. Detox will become a restricted space. Only medical staff and residents who are in detox or observation will be allowed in the lounge or down the detox hall. Observation of all new admits will commence. Observation residents will be restricted to the detox lounge and hallways for an appropriate number of days determined by the medical team to ensure that they do not develop any concerning symptoms following admission. A quarantine room at both facilities will be identified, cleaned, and isolated from general use. These rooms will be used for immediate short-term isolation. Quarantine rooms will have the appropriate PPE stored in the room for use with a suspected case. Quarantine rooms will only be used in the event of a suspected case within the facilities. Upon reasonable suspicion of a case within the facility, the staff who is with the resident and the resident will immediately proceed to the quarantine room and put on face masks. The nurse on shift will put on appropriate PPE and proceed to the quarantine room to assess the resident. The provider on call and the administrator on call will be notified following assessment for further direction. Off-site locations will be identified and procured for longer-term quarantine. Suspected cases will be moved to these locations as determined necessary. All spaces the residents occupy, including the quarantine room and detox, will be deep cleaned and sanitized. Ensuring a ready supply of food, sanitation, and medical supplies are stocked at all facilities in anticipation of potential disruption of services. Directors and coordinators responsible for obtaining these supplies will take appropriate steps to ensure all facilities are prepared. A Level 2 response includes a simple and direct memo going out to the staff outlining the escalated response steps we are taking. Staff will continue to be informed of additional steps being taken as necessary through shift report. Administrative and outreach staff will communicate with our referral sources and or other outside entities regarding the escalated response steps we are taking. Administrative, outreach, and clinical staff will communicate with family members of current residents regarding the escalated response steps we are taking. The morning shift lead at both facilities will be responsible for prompting a morning update of current events being pulled together, which will be shared with the residents in community by staff. We will move to limit the number of admissions. We will look to have only one resident per room in the detox hall, which will need to account for both detox and observation residents. We will begin to utilize off-site third-party detoxification centers if necessary for the new admission, or encourage incoming residents to detox at home to facilitate this reduction in the detox bed availability. We will suspend mandatory and clinical staff meetings indefinitely. Groups of 10 will be allowed to continue with appropriate distancing, meaning 4 to 6 feet between people. We will prop open doors as much as possible within the facility to limit the need to touch doorknobs and poles. We will begin to implement some telecommuting practices for the staff that are able to do so. If sustained local community transmission is present and a staff has a symptomatic family member with whom they live with or become symptomatic themselves, they will be asked to self-quarantine at home. The family member and or the staff member must be symptom-free for 48 hours and 7 days post initial signs and symptoms. The staff must speak to a provider on call prior to returning to work. All visitors to all facilities will be restricted. The exterior doors of the studio will be locked at all times. Deliveries will be dropped outside the lobby or on the loading dock and moved elsewhere by staff on shift. Sponsors will not be allowed on campus, and residents will not be allowed to go off-site with them for passes. Sponsorship interaction will move entirely to phone or Zoom communication. Staff and senior residents will be allowed to serve as sponsors temporarily. Contractors will be allowed into the facility on a case-by-case basis. Ancillary and salon services will be canceled. Suspension of all outside 12-step meetings from the facility will take place. We will no longer transport off-site for outside 12-step meetings. We will pull on all recovering staff to help facilitate 12-step speaker meetings in-house to replace the meetings that we have suspended. Suspension of transporting to non-critical off-site community locations, including the gym, the rec center, Walgreens, Barnes & Noble, church, and the salon will begin. Suspension of all passes off-site for residents who are levels 1 through 5. Curtailing some of the off-site activities for residents who are level 6 and 7. Work will be allowed for those residents, other activities permitted on a case-by-case basis. We will begin a weekly commissary trip to the store on behalf of the residents to pick up basic amenities, including nicotine products. Residents will be encouraged to purchase other personal items for themselves through Amazon or have their family members ship them. A Level 3 response will be initiated by the Executive Committee if the situation surrounding the pandemic becomes so critical that temporary and extraordinary steps need to be taken. Critical situations may include an outbreak of the pandemic pathogen within the facility, infection of critical staff, or a high enough percentage of the staff that safe and proper function of the facilities are not possible, or direction from local, state, and federal municipalities that necessitate further escalation of our response than what is presently outlined. Information about this response level will be disseminated when it is determined necessary to act. An active shooter or hostile intruder is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempt to kill people in a confined and populated area by any means, including but not limited to firearms, bladed weapons, vehicles, or any tool that in the circumstance in which it is used constitutes deadly physical force. In most cases, there is no pattern or method to their selection of victims. Most active shooter situations are unpredictable, evolve quickly, and are over within minutes. In the event of an active shooter in one of the facilities, attempt to evacuate or run. If there is an accessible escape path, attempt to evacuate the premises. Be sure to have an escape route and plan in mind. Evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. Leave your belongings behind. Help others evacuate if possible. Call 911 when you are safe. Prevent individuals from entering an area where the active shooter may be, and do not attempt to move when wounded people. Shelter in place or hide. If evacuation is not possible, find a place to hide where the active shooter is less likely to find you. Your hiding place should be out of the active shooter's view. Provide protection if shots are fired in your direction. Not trap you or restrict your options for movement. To prevent an active shooter from entering your hiding place, lock the door and blockade the door with heavy furniture. If the active shooter is nearby, lock the door, silence your cell phone and turn off any source of noise, hide behind large items, and remain quiet. Protect yourself or fight. As a last resort, and only when your life is in imminent danger, attempt to disrupt and/or incapacitate the active shooter by acting as aggressively as possible against him or her, throwing items and improvising weapons, committing to your actions. When police arrive, make sure to put down any items in your hands, keep your hands visible, follow all their instructions, avoid making quick movements towards police officers. Do not stop to ask officers for help or direction when evacuating. Just proceed in the direction from which the officers are entering the premises. General emergency information. Any emergency that we've talked about is to be communicated to the administrator on call for direction, the counselor on call for support, or any other call for assistance as noted. All facilities have standard phone lines for communication. The studio maintains radios for frontline communication. Staff utilize their cell phones for additional communication. If communication is cut off, the shift lead should make decisions in accordance with policy in lieu of one of the administrators on call or a member of the executive team. The lodge has an 11-passenger van and a 4-wheel drive truck for transportation needs. If additional transportation is required in an emergent situation, staff will be asked to utilize their own vehicles. The studio has 2 11-passenger vans and a 15-passenger van, also a 4-wheel drive vehicle and a passenger vehicle for transportation needs. If additional transportation is required in an emergent situation, staff will be asked to utilize their own vehicles. The studio houses the company helicopter, which is available for transport in emergent situations. Vehicles should always be fueled to facilitate evacuation procedures if necessary.
Hello, I'm Arlen, the maintenance director. I'm going to show you how, in an emergency, how to shut off the water, the power, and the gas. And we're going to start at the studio. We're here at the studio facility in the basement under the laundry room. If you need to shut off the water in an emergency, you'd shut off these 2 valves here. And in a different kind of emergency, if somebody breaks off a fire sprinkler head, you would crank this handle here clockwise and shut that water off. And next we're going to go shut off the gas. Just outside the laundry room on the south side of the building, there's a gas shut-off valve. You take this wrench, put it on that valve to shut it off. And next I'm going to show you how to shut off the power. About 15 feet away from the gas valve, there's 3 shutoffs for the power. There's one inside here. There's one right here. And there's one right here. And next we're going to go up to the lodge facility. Now we're up at the lodge on the northwest side of the building. You shut off the gas by turning this valve down here. And then next we're going to shut off the power, which is just around the corner. Just around the corner north of the gas valve, the power shut off is inside here. You pull these two breakers down. And next we're going to go downstairs to turn off the water. Down in the basement, this is the water shut off, and then we're going to go up to the lookout. Okay, we're on the east side of the building at the lookout. This is the gas shut off down here, and the power is just behind me. Inside this panel here, shut off those breakers. And then next we'll go downstairs to shut off the water. In the bathroom across from the office is the water shut off behind this panel. It's this valve right here. That concludes our training video. Feel free to stop me in the hall if you have any questions.